Hello everyone. So in this part of the video, I'd like to walk you guys through on how to make use of grids. So grids is one way to add layouts to your particular page with Bootstrap. So what does grids actually means is to have rows and columns to be placed in your page. So by placing rows and columns, you'll be able to place your content. So by placing your content within this particular grids, it will look far more neat and responsive at the same time. So this is why we're going to be using grids in our Bootstrap page. So as you can see right here, in order to add grids to your page, so in this particular layout, all you have to do, so in order to add grid layout to your page, all you have to do just need to be adding a class named container like this. This is just one way. And of course, the most important one will be to have rows and columns, right? Like this, as you can see here, we happen to have one class called row, which actually wraps the entire, there's three classes inside here that has been nested within this particular row class. So as you can see, there's three column classes inside the row class right here. And of course, by wrapping your column classes within your row classes, you will be able to find that there can be three columns will be placed in one row like this. And this is the basic structure on how to actually implement grids in our page. Okay, now let's see on how grids actually work. And of course, grids are actually compromises of rows and columns. So in a typical row, there can be all the way up to 12 columns that can be formed within one row. And that particular 12 columns can be placed within one row like here. As you can see right here, when you just place col, or you can just say column like this, if you just say col without any value like this will actually make it responsive to your row. And let's say, as you can see right here we have 4 columns right here. So what does it mean? Makes it is that there'll be 3 columns will be placed in every single div right here. So as you can see, this is the first particular div right here. It actually has 3 columns, and there's another 3 columns right here, and of course the same like here and here. And this is because when you place col, it will be filling up the entire space, and of course it will also make room for others, and they actually shared the same space for row equally. And this is what this particular all the column will be about. And when you add value just beside the column, for in this case we have column dash 8. Column dash 8 literally means is to occupy 8 columns in this particular div right here. And of course col dash 4 is basically the same as is to occupy 4 columns within this particular div right here. And this is a basic idea on how to actually make use of columns. And we can also make use columns on a specific screen sizes by placing SM. So SM is meant for small sized screen, and of course we also happen to have MD right here, and MD can be used for medium sized screen and above. And that's the difference between SM and MD. And if you don't come with anything, like for example col 6 is meant for all screen sizes. That's the difference right here. So as you can see, what does col SM8 literally means is that whenever for small sized screens, this particular column will be occupying 8 columns, and this particular div will be occupying 4 columns right here for small sized screen. And that's the basic idea when we use SM. And if you were to use MD right here, as you can see, when it is medium sized screen, this particular div right here will be occupying 8 columns. And of course, right on our right hand side right here, this particular div says col dash 6 literally means it will occupy 6 columns most of the time, and except for when the screen size is MD, which is medium, it will take up 4 spaces. This is the basic idea of what does you are able to find why there's 2 column properties like this. So this is meant for most of the time, and this is meant for only when the screen size is MD, medium size screen by the way. And this is the basic idea how you're able to make use of columns in grid. Now let's actually look at our example in our code so that we are able to have far more better understanding. Now let's look at our code right here. In our code, we can actually make use of grids layout into our code right here. All you have to do just need to be starting with a class, a div class right like this. And inside this particular div class should be, the first thing we should be doing is to have container to be the class here inside here. In this case I have to say container. Of course, I would like to also like to visualize where is this particular container located. So by that, I would like to have border. Just by saying border, you will be able to find there'll be a gray line will be formed right here. So in this case, I have to add some padding so that you're able to find some space that will be placed within the container. So in this case, I like to say padding equals to 5. So you guys can see when you place padding equals to 5, you're able to find this particular gray colored border will be formed right here. And of course, I also like to add like margin right here just to have some spacing on the top right here. So in this case, I say margin dash 5, and you'll be able to find there's some spacing at the top has been placed right here. And inside this particular container is where we'll be placing the row and the columns. So in this case, the next class I like to add is called row. So in this particular div, I like to place row. So after this particular row, you're able to find that you will need to be placing columns right inside this particular row like this. So in this case, I have to add another class name. And inside this particular div, I like to place a class for column. Just by saying call like this. And when we add column like this, as you won't be finding any effects right here, because you need to be adding colors or something to actually just view the particular column is being created. And first of all, in order to have some visualization, I like to add padding dash 5 as well. And of course, you also need to be adding color. In this case, I like to say bg dash primary as well. You're able to find your column will be placed right here. So in this case, I like to just put a name in for in this case. I like to say column 1. And column 1 is just to represent the first column that we place it. So in this case, there's only one column, one div that actually occupies the entire row. And let's say if you like to make a copy of this particular column, just like make a duplicate of this particular column and placing it right in the bottom below the first column, and just changing this to number 2, you will be able to find there's 2 columns that have been formed right here. Let me just change the color from primary to secondary. And once I change the color, you're able to find there's 2 columns have been placed right here. This particular columns are actually occupying 6 and 6 columns separately of the entire row. And that's what it actually means by saying column. And we can actually increase this particular number of columns just by placing it right below here. And of course, let's change it to success like this. So when you change the color to success, you're able to find there's another new column have been formed right here. So what does this particular call actually means what does it do? It just occupies the entire space, and at the same time it also makes room for other columns to have equal columns as well. That's what column is all about if you don't specify any value to this. Alright, now next thing is that I like to add another column right below the third column right here. And when I add that, of course, there'll be another new column will be formed right here. And of course, I like to change the color to red by changing the text to danger. And like this, you're able to find the fourth color there'll be a 4 columns right here. And since it's responsive, you're able to control this particular width of the particular column, and it'll always be like this. And of course, as you can see, when I reduce the size of this particular column, you're able to find the 4th column will be placed at the bottom right here. Because as you know, when you're using column, there's another new rule that will be applied for small sized screens, where it will only occupy as much as 4 columns when it's small size screen like this. So as you can see, since there's 3 columns right here, so 4 times 3 is 12, and whatever that actually exceeds the 12th column, it goes to the following row. And this is how it actually works for normal column right here. Now let's actually see what happens when we specify the value of columns. So in this case, I like to make a copy of this, and let's just place it right below here, and we can see the difference on the top and the bottom right here. So as you can see, the top is meant for basic grids, and the bottom right here will be meant for column with specific widths. So in this case, let's say column widths, just like this. And of course, I have to remove this particular padding here. We don't need this particular padding. And same goes to the bottom right here. We don't need the padding for both of the containers. And this is how we are able to visualize it now. So as you can see, when we are also able to make use of by adding specific column width, so that it will be far more better. So in the first case, like I say, of course, I'll remove the last one right here. And just by having 3 columns right here, I'll be able to change the size of the columns width. So in this case, I like to make use of I like to have the first column to occupy 6 columns. In this case, I like to say column dash 6. And by saying that, you're able to find the other 2 will be occupying the remaining 6 spaces equally like this. So in this case, this column will be having 3 and this column will be having 3. And let's say if I would like to increase the value of this particular column to 9, and you're able to find, as you can see, when I increase it to 9, the minimum space will be left is 3, and whatever is more than 12 will be moved to the bottom. So when I increase the width right like this, so when I increase the width of the screen, you're able to find this particular row will occupy the remaining columns like this. So 9 here, and with the 3 right here, with the 3 columns right here, they actually having equally separated like this, equally shared among them. So 1.5 and 1.5 like this. And this is how we are able to make use of columns with specific width. And let's actually to see what else can we do. So in this case, instead of just using column dash 9 right here, you also make it equal. So in this case, I will say dash equals to 4 and equals to 4 dash 4. So what does it mean is that this is going to be making sure to use the entire space equally, and we can also make it. And next we can also see what happens when there is an extra space left when we don't actually make use of the entire row. For this case, I like to say, let's say if I use the first column to be 3, and of course I like to use the same value for the following two. In this case, I like to have 3 columns with the same 3 spaces like this. And of course, when there's 3 times 3, it's just 9, and you still have like a 3 more spaces to be filled, and but then there's no column to be filled, so you'll be having like an empty space like this. And this is to make sure to have like a designated place to have your empty space, right? So it does not actually fill the empty space as well. And that's how it makes a difference when it comes to having value within container. And next, I would like to show you guys on how are we able to change the size of the width according to screen sizes. And basically is to make it responsive when we like to change it to different screen sizes, to make the columns to have different size depending on the screen sizes. So that's what I like to show you guys next. So I'd like to make a copy of the previous one like this and place it right below right here. In this case, I will say responsive widths. So what does responsive width means is that I like to make sure to have a certain value only when it's in a certain screen size. So first of all, I like to make use, let's say if you like to have this particular row of 3 columns right here. As you can see, there's 3 columns. So I like to make these 3 columns to have most of the time it should occupy like this. But when it comes to mobile view, I would like to have the first column to be filling up the entire space, while the other 2 columns should be equally occupied in a separate row like this at the bottom right here. So that's how I like to achieve. But as you can see here, when I make it in this, at the moment it's not like this. As you can see, when I reduce the size, it always like this. It always stays in the same row. But I don't want to make it like this. I like to make sure when it's in small size screens, I like to make the first column to fill the entire space. So in order to have that to achieve that particular requirement I've just mentioned, you need to make sure to add column SM. So that's only applies for small size screen. So in this case, I say col dash SM dash 12. So as you can see right here, when you add that dash 12, it actually applies to fill the entire space only when it is in small size screens. So when I increase the width of the particular screen right here, like for example, so as you can see right here, when I add col SM12, the first column actually occupies the entire row, and in order to have the following 2 columns to also occupy their own row, we also need to be adding the same column SM in this case, but then we need to be changing for this case the 12 to 6 like this. And of course we need to make sure to place 6 for both of this so that they're able to spread out properly like this. And of course, you can see here when you open the screen right here, you're able to find this columns are actually aligning like how we wanted to. But as you can see right here, I don't want it to be occupying the entire space on medium size screen like this. So in order to have only small size screens, we must be adding another responsiveness class for MD. So in this case, instead of just saying col dash 4 right here, we need to be adding MD right after this, and this right after SM, by the way. So in this case, I will say col dash MD dash M. You'll be able to find this is how it looks like this. And of course, you'll be making sure to place it right at the bottom here as well like this. And as you can see here, when you place it right like this, you're able to find this particular 3 columns are actually placed in the same row when we increase the size. As you can see, this is the medium size screen. So when you go to small size screen like this, and the first column will be applying this call SM12 feature like this. So now let's actually look at how are we able to change the responsiveness. As you can see, when I go to inspect right here, and when I reduce the size from, actually at the moment we are actually in medium size screen, so when you reduce it a bit, now this is the small size screen, so you are able to find column 1 is occupying the entire row, and we reduce it a bit more further like this, you're able to find the 3 columns actually placed in the same row, which actually applies the first one right here, which is meant for extra small size screens. And that's how it works for actually to make that, and that's how you're able to make use of responsiveness in grid layout. Okay, so next thing I'd like to show you guys, which will be the last one for the particular part right here. As you can see, I would like to make use of the empty space that has been formed right here. As you can see in the second row right here, you're able to find there'll be some empty rows, empty column when there's not enough of columns that have been occupied. So when there's an empty column, we are able to move these 3 columns and move these 3 columns to side or align them in the center, so it does not look really empty like this. So let's make a copy of the second row, and I like to paste it at the last part right here. And of course I like to label this for justifying columns like this. And of course, as you can see right here, we are able to have the row with an extra empty space like this. So in order to make these particular columns to actually to move and align to right, left, center, we are able to make use of justify content styling properties. And let's add that right after this particular row right here. So in order to have, just add justify content. And justified content will be having many multiple ways to justify the content. In this case, let's say around, between, center, and evenly, and these are the ones that are mostly used right here. And of course, usually we'll start with the first one will be actually start. So start is just from this particular left hand side right here, and besides start we also happen to have end. So end will be starting, the content will be starting from right to left like this. And besides end, we also happen to have around. So around will be having spaces between those 3 columns, and of course within the container as well. And besides around, we also happen to have between like this. So between will be having no spaces around the container's edge like this. And this is how you're able to make use of justify content to actually to change or to move your columns around within your row. And not to forget, we also can make them to align to the center like this. And when we align to the center, it just sticks to the center like this. This is how a simple row can also be formed like this. And if you notice that this particular justify content is also one of the properties that can be utilized for flexbox. So flexbox is also another different styling properties in CSS, which can also be applied in Bootstrap as well. So that's the end of this particular part of the video, and hope you guys have learned a lot from this particular part where I've gone through mostly on grids. So how are we able to make use of grids using row and columns, and of course not to forget, we also made use of containers to make them to be aligned to the center. And yeah, that's the end of this particular part of the video. Let's catch up with the next one.